Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. We got another fun episode. I happened to be talking to Roy Huntington about some stuff, and I brought up, I've had a couple of calls this week about lever guns, and we've been discussing that lever guns are kind of experiencing a resurgence. Well, after my phone calls, I've realized, everybody's talking about lever guns. So I called up Roy and I said, let's hit record and just discuss lever guns. So you can watch that in just a second, but first, this quick word from our great sponsor, 4 Patriots. Prepare for those just-in-case situations with delicious and long-lasting emergency food kits from 4 Patriots. These survival meals will give your family the energy they need to get through any emergency. Their survival food kits are a great combination of taste and shelf life, making them perfect for any situation. And as a special offer to the Guns Magazine podcast audience, if you go to 4patriots.com/gunmag, you'll get weekly special deals and discounts. That's 4patriots.com/gunmag. Well, good morning, Roy. Thanks for joining us yet again.
Well, it's always fun.
Absolutely. Well, we just threw this together literally at the spur of the moment because we wanted to talk about something, and that something is lever guns. Now, you and I have been proponents of lever guns for years, but I'm interested in your take. I think lever guns, lever actions are getting like stupid hot. And I think some of it has to do with the Marlin coming back now that it's owned by Ruger. And of course, Henry's been there, very popular. But do you see lever actions becoming the new thing, and why?
I know it's like people say people are discovering revolvers. And they say revolvers are coming back. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, revolvers never went anywhere.
Exactly.
You are discovering revolvers.
Yep.
And I think that's what's happening now. And especially you see we have like the lever action AR-15 platform.
Yep.
I noticed Henry, I think, is coming out with it was like one of their big boys, but it uses an AR-15 magazine or something. Mm-hmm. Did you see anything like that at the SHOT Show?
Well, I saw the lever action AR. I believe that's Bond Arms. I didn't see the Henry one, but I would say, to me, what was really noteworthy was all the people talking about it, both in the industry and then my buddies when I've gotten home. And it's kind of that same thing. Are you familiar with lever actions? Yeah, they've been here since 1870 something.
And Smith and Wesson, of course, just introduced their lever action.
Yep.
And of course, Smith or Winchester Model 94s and the Rossies, and the list goes on and on and on and on. I mean, I think anyone who is introduced to lever guns is not familiar with them, they go from, oh, that's that antique Old West gun
that John Wayne used.
That John Wayne uses, And then, but once you hand them one and then you let them shoot them and they carry it around for a little while, they realize, well, darn, this is pretty darn handy,
Exactly.
And aside from the fact that they come in virtually every caliber that you can imagine, I like the fact because a 30-30 pretty much can do anything you need a rifle to do,
Yep.
And there's not a lot of guns you can say that about, really,
Exactly.
I mean, a 308 is cool and it's a good hunting gun and all that kind of stuff, but it's a lot of gun. And, I have some Model 94s. I have a single shot Henry. I have 1 or 2 other 30-30s, and I like it because you can load it down. I can load a 115 grain lead bullet at 1,200 feet per second, or you can load a Barnes, 150 grain solid copper hollow point at 2,000 or 2,200 feet per second. And so they're just so versatile. And I think people are rediscovering that.
Exactly. And right now, the price to what you get is still pretty low. Now, that may change with everybody getting so excited, but I'll tell you about a incident or a phone call I had earlier this week. And I couldn't have painted this picture any better if I just made it up. Friend of mine who's a very good shooter, a very knowledgeable shooter, he called me and wanted to talk guns. And you know how it is, Roy. Of course, you got to talk guns. Yeah. He wanted to talk about lever actions, and he started in on, these things are really versatile. They're easy to get a hold of in terms of availability. Like you said, the 30-30 or whatever. His choice was a 357 Winchester and 357 Magnum, and he was shooting 38s through it. And he said, if you put that, he was getting it for his camper. And he said, I think this whole idea that if you pull out it, well, first of all, in some states, an AR is essentially illegal or very stringently regulated. Whereas if you pull out a lever action, most people are going to, oh, cool. Either my dad had one as grandpa had one as a deer gun, or that's John Wayne's gun. And it was just so funny to hear a guy who is very knowledgeable, but it's like he just rediscovered this concept. And I said, well, if you'd listened to a podcast a while back or watched anything we've really talked about, I said, yeah, this has been a thing. And I've talked about it several times, but in this context, I'm going to bring it up again. That's my truck gun. I've got an old Model 94 that somebody put black lacquer on, so it's tactical. But all I did was put a non-electric a Skinner sight on the back, a ghost ring, and I've got a cartridge carrier on the buttstock. And here's my reasons for doing this. Number one, if somebody breaks into my truck while I'm fishing or hiking or hunting, and they steal it, I've got $200 in it. And I bought it at a gun show used, bought it from Santa Claus, and it was filthy. When I cleaned it up, it hadn't been shot very much. Obviously, it had been probably living in a pickup truck and shot a few times and never cleaned. Once I cleaned it up, it was just broke in real nice. The bore was pristine. It's a shooter, even though it's pretty ugly. I left the outside kind of the way it was. I just cleaned it and made those two basic modifications, but it's inexpensive. Nobody I know of is going to call a 30-30 a chump round. Sometimes we argue about the 22, the 25, even the 9. You don't have that argument about the 30-30. Now, it won't shoot out to 1,000 yards. If you do, you've got, minute of the sky to make that hit. But I don't need a 1,000-yard gun in my truck. I need a gun that I can deal with 100. If you're out west, maybe 200. But realistically, that's plenty around for me. It's widely available. It's actually pretty easy to load with the bottleneck cartridge. Just slide it right in that side there, and it checks all the boxes for me. And biggest thing is, as my friend commented, you take it someplace like the great state of Illinois or one of the California, you're not going to have too much problem. I don't know the exact laws regarding all that, but it's not going to be like you're pulling out an AR and now you're a death dealing, crazed guy, and Lord knows what would happen. But with your lever action, you're fine. So that's my philosophy regarding the lever action from a self-defense / tactical mode.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I think they're completely off the radar of the tech-to-cool generation. And few things in life pain me as much as when I see these AR-50 or Model 94s that are all, geared up and collapsible AR stocks and rails and all. If you're going to do that, then just get an AR-15. Because it is technically probably a better fighting rifle. So, why handcuff yourself right away? If you're going to do that, you might as well do it.
Yeah.
When I used to camp in the high desert on BLM land in Southern California, and out by Ocotillo Wells and Yuma for people who are from the area there. And if I had an AR style rifle, which I had a real simple one, and in those days, they still had a lot of problems with illegal aliens. And so if it was just my family and I were out traipsing, looking at ruins and stuff like that, I often had that gun with me. But if the BLM police came up, they were always really nice guys, but usually they would come up and say, hello, hey, would you put your rifle down? And so I would put my rifle down, and then they'd walk up and we'd visit and stuff, and everything was fine. If I had my cut down Model 94 Winchester with me, it kind of was like a heavily patinaed kind of a gun. They would walk right up to me and say, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And I'd say, "Well, we're looking at the ruins and this stuff." Like, "Oh, okay, cool. Hey, that's an old what, 94? Yeah. Can I look at it? Sure. Oh, yeah, I love these guns. Okay, have a good day." It was like it was invisible. It was the damnedest thing. So I equate it to the baseball bat and glove that some people do this, and I've told many people who were anti-gun, is they say, "Well, what should I do to protect myself?" And I say, "Well, just get a baseball bat and an old glove mitt from the, five and dime store or something. Slip it over the handle, the baseball bat, and leave it on the back seat in your car. And then if you're ever stopped and they say, 'What's that for?' you look at them and say, 'Playing softball.'"
Yeah.
And a Model 94 is like that.
Yeah. If I ever get stopped and, what is that? It's my deer rifle. Well, it's summer. I said, well, yeah, I was going to take it to the range and just forgot to get it out of the back. I don't see too many law enforcement officers giving you any trouble over it. So
no, I don't think so. I used to always buy Model 94s whenever I saw them. And of course, even up to about 6 or 8 years ago, you could get a straight but heavily patinaed 94 for, $200, $250.
Yeah.
Now those same guns are $500, but I like to take them. I like to cut them down, make little short barreled guns, 16.25-inch barrel, cut them an inch off the butt. Like you say, put Skinner sights on them or something, and put a butt cuff on them, and there you go. You're good to go. You had 5 rounds in the magazine, empty chamber, maybe another 6 or 8 on the butt. So you've got however many rounds that adds up with. You just grab it. I always put a sling on them, and the couple that I keep staged, I also have a little plastic container with earplugs that I keep chained to it, just in case you need to do that. So
yeah. And this concept's been around. I believe Jeff Cooper, didn't he call that the Brooklyn Special? I hope I'm thinking of the right thing there. But he was a big advocate of lever actions for the same reasons of, well, if you can't have a battle rifle or an AR platform or whatever, the lever action, it's not semi-auto, but if you've done any kind of training, you can acquit yourself quite well. And, I often point out it was the original quote unquote assault rifle. That's a misnomer, but I mean, that's what it was. And it never was a main battle rifle that I know of, but it has acquitted itself well through the various wars and shootings and range wars and all that, through history since it's been on the scene.
Well, the Model 95s in 30-06, they were actually purchased as muskets, and so they had a full stock, right?
I'd forgotten about that, yeah.
I believe the Russians bought a lot of them,
yeah.
And I think some even made it over to China. Of course, in the Revolutionary War, or not the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Henry rifle was introduced.
Right.
And the Northern troops, there was a certain amount of them that were issued, not a lot, but there was enough. And as they said, that was the rifle that one Southern pundit said that you loaded on Sunday and then shot all week.
Yep.
And, which brings up, I just got a Henry 357 Magnum lever action, a big boy 357 Magnum. It's got a big, heavy octagonal barrel. You can always beat somebody to death with it if you needed to. It's pretty burly. Although I will say that it balances right at the front of the receiver. So when you actually hold it or shoulder it, it actually really settles right in. But if you're just sort of holding it out front like this, it's like really bonk, muzzle heavy. But they have now incorporated sort of a tube feed arrangement. And so you not only can load it from the tube, just like your favorite old 22, where you just unscrew the tube, pull it out, and there's a cartridge shaped cutout, and you drop, in this, I think it's 10, 357 Magnums in there, and then you close the tube down. And then when you run the action, you're in business. Well, it also has a side loading gate if you want to just top off 1 or 2 or something like that. But what I really like about it is the fact that when it's time to unload the gun, you just unscrew the tube, dump everything out, put the tube back in so the spring follower's there, and then run the action, a few times, because just in case one's got stuck in there or something. But that's so nice that you can unload the gun without having to run the cartridges through the action. Now, I will say, when I'm clearing a Model 94 or something, I run the action and close it almost all the way, but not to where it chambers all the way, because that will now allow you to take that cartridge out. Then you run the action again. So you're not really completely cycling it. So you're not chambering each round. That's something to remember if you have a Model 94 or something like that.
Yep.
But I'll tell you, this gun I had, this Henry rifle, I mean, it was shooting like, I can't remember exactly, but it was like 2 inches at 50 yards with a standard buckhorn sight, which I can't see and is terrible to use.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I covered the Marlin 336 in the March cover gun of Guns Magazine. And let me say, I wrote New Haven, Massachusetts in there. I know better. It's New Haven, Connecticut, North Haven. Yeah. Anyway, I know that. But anyway, typo aside, I relate in there how we got the new Marlins as owned by Ruger, scoped them up with good loophole scopes, and it shocked me when I sighted mine in, I was getting 1-inch groups. And then when we got to deer camp, everybody verified their zero, and everybody was shooting 1-inch. That just amazed me. I know, they're capable of it sometimes, but the old Marlins especially, not so much. But now Ruger knows how to build a darn good gun, and it's amazing the accuracy that we're getting out of just an absolute stock gun with a good sight and with guys behind them that, are pretty good shooters generally. So that was amazing that every one of the writers, and there were some of the engineers there, and everybody got that sub MOA group with a 30-30. So that was pretty eye-opening.
You're right, because the old 94s, people were like, 6 inches at 100 yards. They actually shoot. They actually shoot better than that. But, those buckhorn sights, I tend to put aperture sights on my 94s. And, on a good day, if you're paying attention and, you work the trigger a little bit, because they have kind of bad triggers generally. But you can chase 3 inches pretty easy, with iron sights. If you have a real positive aiming point, that's half the battle. It's hard to aim in the middle of a bullseye. I like to use these inverted V targets. Mm-hmm. And so you can aim at the bottom of the V, and that way you can hold it in. But really, I live in Missouri, and I do any deer hunting I do right here in Missouri. And I can't remember the last time I took a shot more than like 115 yards, and usually they're 40 yards or 50 yards or 75 yards. And so I've never felt undergunned. If I was going elk hunting in the high Sierras or something, you would need something else. Although plenty of elk have fallen to lever action 30-30 rifles.
Exactly.
I think something else that people need to think of is that there's these whole generations of Rossi lever actions, for instance, and you can take a Rossi lever action and slick it up, and you end up with a really nice rifle. I mean, you can get a spring kit for it. That's one nice thing because of cowboy action shooting, is that you can get these spring kits for these guns, and there's a lot of good gunsmiths that know how to work on these guns. And so, just anything that you can find that looks affordable in a caliber you like. I think in a lever gun, that 38-357 makes a huge amount of sense. This Henry that I had the other day, I was getting like almost 2,000 feet per second with 158 grain hunting ammunition in a 357 Magnum.
Yeah.
Well, good Lord. That's arguably better than a 30-30 because it's, 357 caliber as opposed to 30 caliber.
Yep.
My goodness.
It was funny. He noted something that I had noted. He goes, I didn't get a 44 because when I fired him, they got some stout recoil. And I laughed. And I said, I thought the exact same thing. I've never really said it much because I thought maybe I'm a wimp. But, with the longer tube and 44 was a pretty hot round. I wouldn't say it's punishing, but for such a relatively physically small cartridge, it lets you know it's going off. So I think that's one of the things holding the 44 back versus 357. Or, to me, the 44 kicks almost like the 30-30. So why not add all the extra power of the 30-30? So
it's true. I think a lot of that is because there's so much drop in the stock of most of these lever guns, because I have that Henry 30-30, which has more of a straight kind of a shotgun stock, and it's actually really comfortable to shoot. And so I think that's one of the things. But you're right that I once had a H&R handy rifle break open in 44 Magnum. And it would just change your channel when you pulled the trigger. It was like, good Lord. Wow. Yeah, so I used to shoot 44 specials. Something, though, that people need to remember, too, is that, and I noticed that a little bit with the Henry that I was shooting, the action is set up for overall cartridge length of 357 Magnum. And so the case is a 1/10 of an inch longer, and which means the bullets are setting out farther. So if you shoot 38 specials in them, especially lighter bullets like 125s or something, shorter bullets, a lot of times they'll have trouble chambering correctly. They tend to go up past the chamber. And if you have a Model 92 or a Model 94 style gun, if you run the action really fast and you're shooting 38 specials, a lot of times they'll flip right out the top.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, they're just like, So I found if you slow down a little bit when you're cycling the action, either that or just shoot. If you're plinking 158 grain round nose lead or something, that seems to pretty much solve the problem.
Yeah.
But if you're a reloader, of course, just load your 357s down, but use 357 cases. Yep. So the other nice thing I like about it is that when you run the action, it's pretty predictable where the empty's going to go. And so when you're done shooting 6 or 8 or whatever, 10 rounds, they're pretty much all clustered right there in a pile. So that's handy dandy.
Yep. Well, we've got a few minutes left, but I had to jump up on my soapbox and point something out that I think one of the reasons behind this resurgence in the lever action, as we've said, Ruger buying Marlin, Smith & Wesson's coming out. Henry's been here a long time. Rossi's made good rifles. Of course, there's still Winchesters and Brownings and all that out there. But Roy, don't you think a little bit of this has to do with the quote unquote gun media? Because we've seen it countless times. One publication rediscovers a caliber or a type of gun, and then somebody else does, and so on and so on. And now, with the internet, there's a lot of copycat going on. Don't you think like some of this, as we talked about in the beginning, is the lever guns never went away, but maybe a whole new generation of shooters and gun writers is rediscovering them?
I agree. I think especially in the heyday of print magazines, you could definitely drive trends. Years ago, I started covering the 10 millimeter in American Handgunner magazine. And it was right at the beginning because it died, And I forget, somebody came out with a 10 millimeter, and I said, well, we'll put it on the cover. And then I let other people write about it, and we made some videos, and then pretty soon you're seeing that all over the place. And then I'm not saying that we drove that market, but it certainly served to illustrate exactly what you're saying. And so when there's a lever gun on the cover of Guns magazine, people are reminded that that's cool. And I think it also applies to the more sophisticated shooter, because I think a novice shooter looks at that. It's an old rifle. It's scary. It's complicated. They have no idea what it does or how to do it, or they don't understand it or anything. So they just by default get a bolt action something or a AR-15 platform. But as they run through that stuff, and they get tired of Glocks and polymer pistols and $500 AR-15s and stuff. And by now they're getting a little more sophisticated. They're looking for something that's more entertaining, maybe more challenging, something with some soul and some history and some panache. And then they find lever guns,
Yep.
And it's like single shot rifles, So I agree with you, and I'm proud of the fact that we can help drive that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a happy cycle. So we put a lever gun on the cover. That causes readers to become buyers. Companies see that lever guns are selling. They pursue that technology a little bit. Hello, Smith and Wesson. I mean, who would have ever thought in 1,000 years?
Yeah. Well, it was funny in that Marlin piece, and I forgot to mention one thing. This kind of a cool personal note to me, that the very first centerfire rifle I ever shot at probably age 8 to 10 was a model. It was a 336 Marlin in 30-30. My friend's dad had it, and he wanted to know if we wanted to shoot it. And I remember, like, oh, that's a lot bigger than the 22s I'd been shooting. So, I gritted my teeth and it's like, okay, there was some recoil, but it wasn't awful. And I remembered this part I'd forgotten until we were just talking. I'd kept that shell casing in my memorabilia for years, and it's long gone now. But I was so proud that I fired that 30-30. But another thing about that article on the cover article, and I'm not sure, I think the photo made it because we send up the photos to production, and sometimes they got to cut them for space and all this. But I found an old Guns magazine cover, and I said it may have been the first of that genre. It was a completely staged shot. Two hunters startled by their Model 9, by a ginormous buck on the bluff right over them, and they've got their 94. And, it was clearly staged. I'm sure that deer was probably stuffed or a cut and paste job, but it was so cool. And if you think back to our when we were kids reading all those magazines growing up, they all had them, the giant deer, the hunter with his 94 or sometimes a Marlin, but, sitting around a campfire or I remember one, and I wish I could find it. They were just stepping out of their old school station wagon, and it almost implied road hunting. But, back then, stuff like that happened. But yeah, I mean, it is just so rich in tradition. And I think that's, again, another reason that both the gun media and just shooters in general that are getting older and more sophisticated, they want to understand that stuff.
They do, and it's a happy place. At least for all the reasons that you've just talked about, your first centerfire rifle shot and stuff. I mean, if I've got there is a lever gun right over here right now. And I mean, I always have a cut down 94 by me. When you look over at it, you kind of go, oh, okay. I just got back from a 2,500 mile road trip in our pickup truck, and guess what went with me? One of my cut down 94s in an old beat up zippered case, with an extra box of ammunition in it, and it just throws in the back underneath everything. And just, I call it my get home gun, But as you said, the beauty is if I get pulled over somewhere and for some reason they decide they have to, investigate what I'm doing, and they come across it, you just go, that's my grandpa's 30-30. I'm bringing it back from his house. Yep. So,
problem solved.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I would like to encourage people and don't forget they have lever action 22s, which are great teaching guns.
Great.
And I have a friend who lives in California, and he bought himself a lever action 357, so he's got a 10 round 357 Magnum home protection gun that no one's going to be upset about, As I remember some years ago, California was seriously talking about limiting magazine capacity in lever actions, limiting it to 5 rounds. Yeah, I know. Thank you, California. So, Anyway, there's a lot of opportunity now. There's a lot of people doing interesting things. If you want an AR-15 that's lever action, that's going to be happening pretty soon. And but I advocate to be traditional, and for that, go to Winchester, go to Henry, go to Marlin, now go to Smith and Wesson. So,
yep,
and good luck and have fun.
It's one of those guns to me, whenever you buy one, I mean, you're always satisfied, but there's just something different about a lever. It's a different class, and maybe it's because of my memories as a kid. But if you don't own a lever gun and you've watched this far, make that your next gun. And I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. So
I agree. Yeah.
harumph, as we say around here. So, well, Roy, thank you so much for doing kind of almost an impromptu episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. But, you know, we were talking about levers and said, well, let's just hit record and make this thing happen. So, but once again, to our unofficial co-host, Roy, thanks for joining us.
You bet. Always fun. Let's do it again.
Had a great time talking to Roy about one of my favorites, lever guns. And as I said, if you don't have one, you need one. Well, before we go, I'd like to remind you, please check out our great sponsor, 4Patriots. If you go to 4patriots.com, type in /gunmag, that will take you to a special page where you can find all the deals and discounts exclusively for the Guns Magazine podcast audience. That's 4patriots.com /gunmag for all your preparedness needs and supplies. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of all my coworkers here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.